Without a doubt, the big question that I've gotten in the last 2 weeks or so since the news broke was not about Royal Caribbean, not directly anyway, but about Carnival Cruise Line and the big change they made to their loyalty program. And I thought in this week's episode, we really need to dive into this, really need to talk about this because it's not only interesting, I think, from a Royal Caribbean fan standpoint, there's a little bit of when you, what's it called on the highway when you watch a crash?
It's called watching a crash.
No. But
Rubbernecking.
There's rubbernecking component to this. And I thought that's one aspect of it. But of course, many of us are also doing the neighborly thing, peeking over the fence and seeing, what's going to happen, how's that going to affect my property. And anyway, joining me on this episode is a very good friend of mine, Becky Menken from MEI Travel. Becky, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks. It's great to be here. This always happens on the group cruises, so it's nice to actually sit down and talk about this interesting topic.
Yeah, so we're recording this episode on Independence of the Seas. This is one of our Royal Caribbean blog group cruises. We have 2 a year. Next one's in October 5th on Oasis of the Seas. So there's still time to join us. And we also have an audience that's watching it. So if you hear other voices occasionally yelling things out, well, that would be our audience members. But anyhow, let's break this down because it's really interesting, the changes in the program. So Carnival is basically just, I would say, nuking their program. They are wholeheartedly just revamping it, and it's a lot like an airline program. Carnival's program, I'm not terribly familiar with it, so if you have any angry emails about how wrong I am about Carnival's current program, you can send them to Becky@MEItravel.com.
And I'll forward them to him.
Yeah.
So
But essentially, they have a similar program to Royal Caribbean in WIT currently today, where you earn your status, it's your status for life, and there's different tiers. Basic program, like most cruise lines have that program. The difference is that going forward, they're going to get rid of that completely. Basically, Carnival realized they have a problem on their hands with a lot of elite level members. I believe Diamond is their top level, and they have so many members. And just like Royal Caribbean, if your kids at being that level, they get their status. And they looked at it, I think, twofold. One was, and this is my opinion now, they looked at it as they have too many loyalty members to handle, which obviously has ramifications, both financially and logistically to manage. And then they also have the cost side of things and trying to, take advantage of that. So anyway, we'll dive into this, but they're really interesting. So this going forward, it's going to be almost like an airline says. It's more based on, certainly the amount of nights you cruise is a component, a factor, but if you familiar with an airline program, it's more about how much you spend. So somebody who spends more money on a suite, like someone who spends more money on first class ticket versus economy, you're going to get higher stats. You're going to earn more points, rather, I should say. And in looking at that, there's also a casino component, how much money you spend in the casino, and also the credit card. They're going to get rid of their current credit card, launch a new credit card that also ties into their program. And so all of this, and you have to requalify every 2 years for your status, which is a really big deal.
Love call right there. That's the big lift, is to say, all right, you're here, but you have 2 years and you have to relift that again.
Yes. That's really, I think the 2-year thing is what's the most surprising about this because, there's a lot of surprise components to this. But airfare is, when you're in an airline, I'm not an airline expert, but I do believe that business travel drives that market. The people, in the same way for the hotels, you're probably only reaching the elite levels of a hotel program or an airline program if you travel a lot for business because you're on the road enough times to make it worthwhile. If you're a consumer, if you're doing it for family vacations, you simply, unless you have one heck of a family vacation budget, you're probably not traveling enough to even approach the top tiers, let alone the mid tiers. So that's what's surprising because cruising is not a business related, except for me, but it's not a business related component. There's not, there is not a need to cruise in that same way that I need to fly to Fort Lauderdale for a business trip or something like that.
Well, it's even with the hotel chains. A lot of them are still nights, not spend.
Yeah.
So for me, this is more akin to an airline program, much like when Delta made their change to post-spend. And pretty much all of them are falling in line. Yeah. So that's the scary part is this where it starts.
Well, yeah, right. And I think there's two things. Again, there's the loyalty aspect of it, the too many members to handle. I kind of get that. Royals always just, I think, approach this up until now anyway, as like, if there are too many Pinnacles on board, you're just not going to get into the Suite Lounge.
Right.
And if there's too many Diamond members on board, you're not getting into the Diamond Lounge. It's not the best solution, but it is, I would say, is it the fairest solution? It's the simplest solution to the problem. We're still offering the benefits, but if there are too many of you, sorry, this is the reality. It's like a fight. There's too many people in the restaurant. We're overbooked, the fire limit in the room, that kind of a thing, and treat it that way.
Right, but you're running into that same problem. So I think we're seeing it across the board in travel, that between 2021 and 2024, every major cruise line has had this issue with people on the top levels. And it's hard to say, if you attain this level, you get this, this perk. So I can see where they're all wrestling with it. And I can understand that these guys, of course, are taking a major off ramp to try to figure it out, rather than what Royal did was just say, okay, this may or may not work for you. They're trying to get to a point where they can say, yes, you get this level, you get these perks.
Right. But I think, so here's the thing. That's one component of it. I think that's the public facing reason. There's no doubt in my mind the money component is a big part of it. If it was purely about logistics, they would have made changes not related so much to revenue driving things, part of it. Like the 2-year thing, I think, is logistics. Like, that way they can have a little bit of churn and, keep the numbers down. But I think the money component, the fact that casino, the new credit card, and the sheer amount of money you would have to spend to reach or to keep diamond level every 2 years.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it's like, what is it, $33,000?
$33,000 every 2 years to maintain that status is what they projected.
Yeah. Now, I don't know what Carnival, I know Carnival prices and Royal Caribbean prices aren't exactly the same. So $33,000, if you figure a 7-night cruise on Royal, obviously that's which 7-night cruise you're on, Grandeur of the Seas versus Icon of the Seas. But, if we're just let's use easy math here for a second. Just say $5,000 for a family of 4 on a 7-night cruise in some sort of cabin. So now you're extrapolate that out, right? I mean, that's still a lot of cruising to take. Most people don't hit that. I think the average person cruises like once, and then they probably take a break for a number of years. I think people who cruise twice a year are still an anomaly. When you tell your family you cruise twice a year, they're like, again?
Yeah.
So
true.
So that's 4 cruises every 2 years. I don't think you're hitting that. And that's only $20,000 in my back of the napkin math over here. So you really need to hit, 3 cruises a year, 4 cruises a year, something like that, which is, again, in my experience, that is a very small percentage of people who cruise that often, assuming this math all works out and all this other stuff. Plus there's casino, and it's still a lot. And it's kind of, but I think the revenue aspect of it, this is the big thing. Is it about logistics, too many members, or is it about money? And to me, and again, we haven't seen it yet, but my thing is it's about money. It's about, the cruise lines are, even that they suffered terribly a couple of years ago financially, but I think they see the opportunity now, at least Carnival does. And I think I think it's about money. I think it's about driving revenue.
I would say that you're probably correct, with a little bit of this other mixed in. I think that the other pressures that came along with it, with crowding those tiers and so forth, was the catalyst for them to go ahead and say, yes, let's make this change. I mean, if you look at what really gave me the realization that this is where they're going is when they brought up the credit card.
Yeah.
Because that's where a bunch of these airlines are making a ton of money. So when it does come to them giving these perks for the loyalty, and there's so much cost associated with it, they see that there's this opportunity to make more money, obviously. And I think part of it, which I haven't seen what the rewards will be at these high levels. So depending on what those rewards are, it may make sense, depending on what lands on each one of these tiers.
Yeah. I think what's the bigger thing with this, I mean, the question now, as it will bring this back full circle, is, of course, well, will Royal Caribbean do something similar? Will other cruise lines follow suit? And by the way, this changes only for Carnival Cruise Line, not for their other Carnival brands like P&O or Holland America or anything like that. So for what it's worth. And the other thing is, we're not really going to know the fallout of this for a number of years, because the current members are grandfathered in for, I believe, 6 years before the changes actually start hitting them. Like the change, the new changes go into effect much sooner than that. But if you're a current Diamond member, I believe you're grandfathered in for, like, I think the number is 6 years. It's a while. So the bottom line is, we're not going to know the full fallout until, goodness, a number of years from now. And so we can't, you can't draw conclusions, because, obviously the knee-jerk reactions on, social media are just that, and people whether or not that actually changes anything going, in the short term. I think it's more of a long-term thing. We have to look at this, 5 years plus to really gauge how effective it is.
Right. And I don't blame anybody for reacting the way that they're reacting.
Yeah.
Because the moment that you give something to somebody is great. The moment you take it away is not so great.
Yeah.
So obviously you're working towards loyalty, and this whole program was set up on bringing you back. Come back, be loyal to us, and we'll reward you. And now it's turning from we care about your loyalty no matter where you are, to we care about how much you spend.
Yeah. I read an article this morning about, it's the IKEA effect. Like when you purchase them from IKEA and you build it yourself, you have much more invested in it. You're prouder of it. It means more to you than something you just purchase off the shelf and it's like, oh, there it is. And loyalty is that. You're building towards that. You cruise a lot, you spend a lot, you come back again, you make conscientious choices to cruise on a cruise with a cruise line rather than another cruise line versus another type of vacation. And so I think that is absolutely a component to it. I think Royal Caribbean, they're obviously going to pay attention to this. I think every cruise line is going to pay attention to this. The real question is, again, in however many years, whether it's 5 years, 10 years from now, is it going to drive more revenue? Because at the end of the day, these are publicly traded companies. And from everything they do, whether you're building Perfect Day Coco Key, whether you're building a new ship, anything you're doing, I mean, there are other goals, but the primary goal is to, obviously, as a for-profit company, to generate as much revenue as possible. And a change this sizable, board of director buy-in is probably part of that. And you can't sell the board of directors on a program that's going to drive less revenue. I mean, you got to have like, well, we think it's going to do X, Y, and Z, and that will do that kind of thing. But I mean, from a fan standpoint, I don't want this program for Royal Caribbean.
Right.
I don't think anybody necessarily wants this, unless, of course, you're a baller and you're just looking to. I mean, the people that benefit best are going to be someone who doesn't cruise that often, but spends a heck of a lot of money on a cruise, right? Those people would probably stand to benefit the most because they could reach the top tiers much faster. Because right now, to reach Pinnacle, 700 points. I mean, even Diamond Plus. I mean, that still requires many years of cruising, many years of it. Even if you cruise at a rapid pace, you're still going to take a long time to get to that level.
Yeah, I've been sailing since 1997. On the Viking Serenade was my first ship, believe it or not, and I'm still not Pinnacle. So I totally get that.
Yep.
But I want to look at it really quickly from a devil's advocate perspective, because not that I believe in this, but I'm a Libra, therefore I look at both sides all the time. And there's a couple of other components too that I was thinking about that that the company may be looking at, because look where they're trying to go and where they've been, right? So they've got these brand new ships that are beautiful equipment, and actually a little bit of a different story than what they've been telling with the other ships in the fleet, right? They just put in how much money for this new private island that they're trying to push to. So maybe part of this is a little bit of trying to push where they want to go as opposed to where they've been. And where they've been is the perception that they have about what that brand is. So if they start trying to find the more elite status people that will spend more money, give them more money in the coffers, that might bring up their perception of what the brand is overall.
I mean, there's a lot of, the glass is half full ways to look at this, I suppose. But I think the bigger issue is I think it's the shot at the loyalty. It's what you said earlier, Becky, that we care about your loyalty. We love your loyalty. Thank you for being a loyal member. And then it's like, just kidding. Now we don't mean that anymore.
And there could be some is a note that I just read about some artificial scarcity too, where they may believe that a smaller, more exclusive group of elite guests will be easier to serve, thus more profitable, a little bit more uplifted and elevated in the service, which is things that they may want to try to get to.
Yeah. I mean, this goes back to something else that others have brought up in general, and cruising in general, which is the idea of being loyal to a cruise line versus just cruising where you feel comfortable with. And obviously here, as Royal Caribbean fans, we generally obviously like Royal Caribbean, probably cruise them either exclusively or very close to that level. And I think this hits, heart closer to home than somebody who cruises on a number of cruise lines. If I cruised on, the major cruise lines, 4 or 5 different lines out there, and I was more agnostic towards which one was my favorite. I don't know that I would care so much about the program. I mean, I guess maybe if I had achieved some sort of status with Carnival, again, it depends on where you are in that, but assuming that you were more on the, like with airlines, I fly every airline that I possibly can because I really don't care. I live in Orlando. We have a number of different airlines. We don't have a dominant airline.
Right.
So like if American is cheaper one week, I'll fly American. If it's Delta, if it's JetBlue, well, I just don't care because I'm not going to ever accrue status with them to that point. So I just fly the cheapest one that's out there for where I want to go.
And I'm the polar opposite.
Yeah.
I have 2 airlines only, the hub in Seattle, and I'm looking only at those 2. And if someone says, "Oh, well, Southwest is X numbers lower," and I'm like, "I don't care. I want my points. I don't want to spend because I am going after that level, that loyalty."
The real question, now I'm just circling back in, is will Royal Caribbean do the same thing?
I really hate to speculate about that because if this goes over well, if it shows profitable and others are doing it, somebody else follows. Where one goes, others do tend to go. And it tends to be we have to remember that while we love this company, we love Royal Caribbean, we love whatever cruise line we love, it's a for-profit company at the end of the day. So they're going to make decisions based on hopefully looking at the balance of the two.
Yeah.
Hopefully they don't go, all right, what would really upset me is if I get like 21 points away from Pinnacle and they change it. That's going to make me upset, which I can imagine they're giving them 2 years. I think it's June 26th when this starts rolling out, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, they're giving a grandfathering in a little bit more to allow people to go up. But again, the thing that gets me so much is that 2-year thing. I know I'm just repeating myself, but it keeps coming up in my mind. That's the place where I think they could have maybe pulled back a little bit and allowed this to roll out a little smoother.
My hope is that knowing Royal Caribbean, I feel like while there's like when gratuities go up, usually you see them go up across all the lines, right, like in like a domino effect. However, Royal Caribbean is very competitive. And while if they were here in the room, if you had the executives here, they would say, well, we're always monitoring, trends in the travel industry and we're always considerate of all those things that are happening, but we don't really compete with other cruise lines. We compete with the travel industry.
Way to these channels,
yeah. But in truth, obviously they're paying attention. However, there's that competitive nature to them. Like when they look at their products, whether it's a ship or a private destination, while they don't directly compare themselves to other brands of what they're doing, they are certainly want to make sure they're one-upping them and doing better.
Right.
And my hope is if they were ever to go in this direction, they would not certainly do a copy and paste job. It would be more of a homogenization, a hybrid approach to it. I don't know what that looks like because I don't think I love any of these things. We've talked about this topic in the past, like how do you fix Crown and Anchor Society in terms of, just forget the money aspect, because the money aspect is a completely different animal, but the too many members, because we've seen Michael Bailey post on this Facebook, what should we do about it? And unfortunately, inertia is the best way that they've seen to just easier just continue doing it and limiting people rather than they already have more tiers than any other cruise line out there. So adding another tier just seems to move the goalposts further away and doesn't seem to achieve much, quite frankly, other than just annoy people and
isn't that the truth?
Right. So I don't know. I hope they don't. But it's hard to say where Carnival will go because it's so early in the game. I think they would. I mean, truth. If you pump them full of truth serum, Royal Caribbean executives, they probably say it's too early for us to make any. So we got to see where we'll let them play their game here and see where that goes and do our own analysis. And
that's the thing is they're in a great position because they get to just sit back and watch and see how many people they lose off of their off of the repeatability because of these changes. But then in 2 or 3 years where it kind of settles down and sets in, and then they have a new generation that starts cruising, is this going to eventually be more profitable and better for the cruise line and better for the guests in their mind that don't know any better from before?
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, I could be wrong. I don't see this as a do I see them making the Royal Caribbean making a similar change by the end of the year? I don't see that. But
neither. I'd hope not.
I hope, yeah.
Because
I would hope they really wait and see a little bit longer than that to be able to figure that out.
Yeah, I think that if they sat back and watched it for a couple of years. It's going to, again, take a little bit of time to really see if this is going to be beneficial for Carnival when they pull this off, or if it's going to be a complete PR disaster and they have to come back around. Maybe they just sit back and not do anything, and then they're going to be at a good spot. I would see somewhere there might be some adjustments in Crown and Acre, but knowing the company, knowing how much they do really appreciate their loyal members.
Yeah.
And they do go to great lengths to reach out. I mean, it's funny. I was sitting there watching the top tier event the other day and realizing I've never seen this on any other cruise line that I've been on. I'm sure that there might be somewhere, but we both been on Disney.
Yeah.
Have you see people that have done hundreds, 200, 300 cruises, but there's never been an acknowledgement like that. So to see them do that on every ship, every week, to reach out and say, you are important to us, I just have a hard time thinking that they would pull back on those reins.
Well, we'll have to wait and see. Becky, thank you for joining me on this week's episode.
Thanks for having me.
All right, friends, time to answer listener emails. Our first email is from Wes in Fort Myers, longtime listener, first-time emailer. My wife and I are going on Oasis of the Seas for an 8-night cruise. We decided to splurge a bit and purchase the ultimate dining package for the first time. The question here is in regards to the etiquette in the main dining room. I usually request a table for 2 by the window once we get on board, and that request is usually granted. However, I don't want to be a jerk and take up a preferred dining spot if we're only going to eat there 1 or 2 nights. So, my questions are, number 1, do I need to let the waiter or the head waiter know we won't be there most nights, or are they automatically notified when we have a specialty reservation? No and no. They're not notified, and you don't have to let anybody know. They'll figure it out. I mean, they're not going to sit there and, worry. Where are they? I can't believe they're not here. They understand how a cruise works. It's not their first rodeo. So you definitely don't have to let them know. I usually let them know if I know in advance I won't be there, just to give them a heads up. But that's more of just like a, hey, just FYI, not a requirement. And if we did make plans to go to specialty dining, or we got too tired to go, or whatever the case, the reason why we didn't go to the main dining room, I wouldn't really think twice about letting them know. It's just, they'll figure it out. Number 2, should we let them know the specific nights who won't be in the dining room? Yeah, like I said earlier, if you know specifically you won't be there, let them know. So that way, they're not, they're still going to set the table. They're still going to be prepared for you. They always prepare for, just in case. So I wouldn't necessarily worry too much about it. But obviously, if you do know for a fact you won't be there, yeah, well, give them a heads up on that. And lastly, should I forego my usual request regarding a window table, or are they able to use it for other guests who are not there? Yeah, you should definitely still do that. If you're not there, they may use your table for my time dining, or somebody else who's trying to sneak into dinner because they missed their time. Variety of things. So long story short, I really wouldn't worry too much about it. I know you're trying to do the right thing and be considerate and all that, which is great. But in this situation, I think you're good just, giving them as much info as you have and rolling with it otherwise. My next question is about the old unlimited dining package. Are we able to use our $20 credits for both lunch and dinner? For example, on a sea day, can we get lunch at Playmakers and then get dinner at Portside Barbecue, or is it just one $20 credit per day with the other meal needing to be in an all-inclusive, especially restaurant? I feel like I'm overthinking this, but still want to get your take. Thanks for all the great advice over the years. We're trying St. John, U.S. Virgin Islands, this trip because of your recommendation. Wes, regarding the dining, your first scenario is correct. So on a sea day, you could go to Playmakers and Portside on the same day. It's $20 per day at that restaurant. So you just can't go to Playmakers twice in the same day, or Portside twice in the same day, or Zumi Sushi twice in the same day. That's how that basically works there. So thank you, Wes, for the email. Our next email is coming to us from Melanie in Connecticut. We went on our first cruise in February 2024 and already have our 7th cruise booked for Icon in April 26th. I'm hoping to book a drink package around Black Friday if there's a good deal. My husband doesn't drink, and I know I can call and have them get us the refreshment package. How would that work with discounts if there's a BOGO 50% off? I've been enjoying listening to your podcast and watching your YouTube videos. So a couple things. Number 1, don't wait till Black Friday. If you know you want to get it, I would call in now and book at the current rates. Prices might not be better on Black Friday. They typically are, but there's no guarantee on that. So I would just, generally speaking, I recommend you book things like a drink package as early as humanly possible. Lock in the price, and if there are other prices or better prices out there, call in and ask for that. As it relates to the BOGO deal, that's actually a good question. Whenever I've done that before, like my wife doesn't want a drink package, but I do, I'll call Royal Caribbean, and I'm not sure how they handle the actual discount for the refreshment package, because what Melanie's alluding to is, the price, if you will, was based on this idea of, you're buying 2 of them. It's a BOGA. You're getting, the 40% off, 35% off, whatever it is. And that in turn gets you the quote unquote lower price during the sale. You would have to kind of hash it out with them. I don't know that there's necessarily, it's funny. It's one of those questions that first time I've ever actually been asked this question, but I've done it many times. I just kind of basically every time I called Melanie, I was just like, well, it is what it is and I'll pay what it is. And, I got to think they're using prevailing rates that you see there, but I'm not sure how that actually works out. It's kind of interesting. It's one of those things I just never thought of, but that's a really good question. So sorry I can't be more helpful on that. And our last email today is coming to us from Shelly. Hi, Matt. My 20-something kids and I are new to cruising. We've been on Wonder of the Seas twice. We love that ship, but we love the 7-night cruise. I know she's going to start doing shorter cruises soon. Are there any plans for Wonder to go back to the longer cruises at some point? As it stands right now, Shelly, no. We only can see through early 27, because that's all the itineraries that are released right now. And as of now, it's just simply going to be short cruises for Wonder. That will probably eventually change at some point, whether that's in 27 or 2037, I don't know. But as of right now, no. My son and his roommate received enough points from the casino on our 2 cruises to get mostly free cruise going on Utopia of the Seas in March of 26 on a 4-night cruise. I'm doing a 7-nighter on Symphony in February since it's so similar to Wonder. We hope it continues cruising as much as possible. We love watching your lives and getting the newsletters. Thank you. Shelly, thank you so much. Appreciate that. And thank you to everybody for listening to this episode of the Royal Caribbean Blog podcast. Of course, you can always email me your questions by emailing them to Matt, M-A-T-T, @RoyalCaribbeanBlog.com. Until next time, I'm Matt. We'll talk again real soon.